Why Hollywood keeps failing and still won't admit why. Hollywood lost $2 billion at the box office last year alone. Not from one film, not from one studio, from an industry-wide collapse that nobody in that industry seems willing to explain honestly. Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny, The Flash, Ant-Man, Quantumania, Shazam, Fury of the Gods, Mission Impossible, Dead Reckoning, one after another. Hundreds of millions spent, hundreds of millions lost. And the question nobody in Hollywood will answer out loud is the simplest one of all. Why does this keep happening? Because they have every advantage. More money than any filmmakers in history. More technology, more data, more marketing power, more screens, more platforms. And yet, the results keep getting worse. That is not bad luck. That is not a coincidence. Something is fundamentally broken inside the machine, and the people running it either cannot see it or they refuse to say it. This is why Hollywood keeps failing, and why they still won't admit it. Let's start with the excuses, because Hollywood has plenty of them. The first one is streaming. The industry spent years telling itself that the decline of theatrical attendance was because of Netflix. People would rather stay home. The pandemic changed behavior permanently. Nobody wants to go to the cinema anymore. Except that is not what the data says. Top Gun Maverick made over $1.5 billion in 2022. Oppenheimer made close to $1 billion. Barbie crossed $1.5 billion. All theatrical releases, all massive successes. People will still go to the cinema, they just need a reason to go. The second excuse is COVID. The pandemic disrupted the industry, and audiences never fully came back. There is some truth in this, but it does not explain why certain films continued to perform at record levels while others collapsed completely. COVID did not selectively destroy specific franchises. Poor creative decisions did. The third excuse is piracy. Rising production costs, a difficult economic climate, audiences who are too distracted by social media to engage with serious storytelling. Every single one of these is a real factor. None of them is the root cause. They are symptoms Hollywood points at to avoid diagnosing the actual disease. And the actual disease is something they created entirely themselves. Look at what Hollywood did to its own franchises. This is where the damage is most visible and most devastating. 10 years ago, Marvel was untouchable. They had built something genuinely remarkable, a connected universe of films that audiences were emotionally invested in, characters they cared about, stories that built on each other over years. The culmination of that era with Avengers Endgame pulled in over $2.5 billion globally. It remains one of the highest-grossing films ever made. It was a genuine cultural event. And then they destroyed it. Not in one move. Slowly, film by film, decision by decision, they flooded the market with content. DC Plus series after DC Plus series that you needed to watch just to understand the films. Characters nobody asked for. Stories that felt disconnected from everything that came before. The quality collapsed because the output volume tripled. You cannot maintain creative standards when you are manufacturing content on an assembly line. The results were catastrophic. Ant-Man Quantumania opened to the lowest reviews of any Marvel film in over a decade. The Marvels became the lowest-grossing Marvel Cinematic Universe film ever released. Audiences were not just staying away, they were actively disengaging from a franchise they used to love. That is not a market problem, that is a trust problem. And Marvel broke that trust themselves. Indiana Jones is another example that should have been a warning nobody heeded. Harrison Ford returning to one of cinema's most beloved characters at 80 years old, a legacy sequel designed to pass the torch, $300 million budget, global release, and it underperformed so severely that Disney reportedly took a loss of over $100 million
on a film featuring one of the most recognizable characters in movie history. How do you lose money on Indiana Jones? You make a film that does not understand why anyone loved Indiana Jones in the first place. The Terminator franchise has been rebooted 4 times since Terminator 2 in 1991. Every single reboot has underperformed. Every single one. They keep returning to the same well, expecting different results and getting the same failure each time. Ghostbusters 2016 became one of the most publicly rejected films in recent memory before it was even released. The Flash had one of the most dramatic theatrical collapses in blockbuster history, despite years of development and a reported budget of over $200 million. These are not isolated incidents. This is a pattern, a systemic pattern that Hollywood keeps repeating because nobody inside the system has the authority or the incentive to break it. The franchise problem points to something deeper. Hollywood stopped making films for the people who actually watch films. There is a version of filmmaking that starts with a story. A filmmaker has something they want to say, a character they want to bring to life, a world they want to build. They make that film and they trust audiences to connect with it because genuine creative vision is something people can feel. It is not something you can manufacture. Then there is the version of filmmaking that currently dominates Hollywood. It starts with a spreadsheet, market research, demographic targeting, diversity consultants, focus groups, algorithm analysis of what themes performed well in the last cycle. By the time the film reaches a screen, it has been approved, adjusted, tested, noted, re-edited, and focus grouped into something that offends nobody and moves nobody. It is engineered to be acceptable rather than created to be great, and audiences can feel the difference immediately. The Barbie movie made $1.5 billion. People will point to that as proof that modern Hollywood can still connect with audiences when it wants to. But Barbie worked because it had a genuine creative voice behind it. Greta Gerwig made a film that had a perspective. It had something to say and a specific way of saying it. It was not a product assembled by committee. It was a film made by